The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen and beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever again!
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have in my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni.
Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Coming up on this episode of the Filthy FRB Show, we'll be talking Burt Watson's resignation and what it means for the UFC. Ronda Mania coming out of UFC 184. We'll also be talking about the Rampage lawsuit filed by Bellator. UFC 185 coming up in Dallas. And UFC 187, one of the best cards in UFC history.
You know, Tom, coming out of UFC 184, I think it was, the big story wasn't Ronda Rousey, beating somebody in 14 seconds. It was the legendary babysitter to the stars, Burt Watson, quitting the UFC after 14 years. And when I was told about it, I was shocked. And I started telling people, and they were like, no, come on. What was your reaction when you heard about it?
Yeah, Brian, I was actually on the plane coming back from Turkey when I found out about it, and I pretty much immediately messaged you right after to try to find out more news. I was shocked. Burt's been a mainstay, a staple. He's the guy, honestly, that makes everything run backstage. Like, as far as I'm concerned as a fighter, he's almost the first point of contact during that entire fight week. And he just does a phenomenal job. There's not too many people that have bad things to say about him, and there's a reason for that.
Sure. I mean, I reached out to some people to ask them about Burt, and I've been around the scene for a while, so I kind of had an idea what he did. But basically, everybody, it was almost unanimous. They said there's no one that can replace him.
Yeah, absolutely not. There's some really good people that work backstage for the UFC and do a lot of great things and, are phenomenal at their job. But there's not one person out there who could fill Burt's shoes. It's just not going to happen. It'll be interesting to see, what happens at these upcoming shows because I can't imagine the UFC without Burt.
Yeah, and from the people that I reached out to, Burt is he's a very proud man, and he takes a lot of pride in the job that he does, and he keeps himself to a high standard. And so when somebody questions him, he takes great offense to that. So, I don't know if that's always the best attitude to take offense to somebody, questioning you, but he does, at least from what I was told. And there was a couple different issues going on. Let's rewind it and give everybody the setting. It was Friday before UFC 184, and everything was going smoothly. With the pre-weigh-in, people show up, they try their gloves on, and everything was going smoothly. Something happened. It was a combination of Mark Munoz's weight cut and then an incident with somebody from Ronda Rousey's camp, and it got brought up the chain. From what I was told initially, Reed Harris was involved, and then it went above that, from what I'm told, and I can only assume that that's Dana White and Lorenzo. and they didn't take Bert's side. They flat out said, Bert, we're not with you on what you're saying. And he's a very proud guy. He got upset and he fucking quit. And it wasn't a heat of the moment thing, because it sure as hell sounds like he's done.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. You know a lot more on the subject than I do. I've been going to you to get my news. Pretty much, I mean, the only thing that I know is, from what I've dealt with Bert, and I mean, the guy's the man. I could definitely see him taking offense to something that somebody higher up would say if they're picking somebody else's side. And we could speculate all we want. The Mark Munoz thing, I put a little less stock into that because I just can't see, I guess I can't see the brass in the UFC taking, Munoz's camp side over Bert. It was said that it was Ronda Rousey's camp that Bert had an issue with. And if that's the case, you could definitely see the UFC brass picking the side of Ronda Rousey. She's the big cash cow for him right now. So, I would lean more towards, I'm guessing it was just an issue that just boiled up, and he got into it with, Reed Harris or somebody, and it just moved its way up the chain.
Yeah, it's such a weird story because, there's so many people running around backstage, but, so many there doesn't seem to be a ton of information out there. I mean, even Bert himself doesn't really want to go into specifics. So I don't know if that's just him taking the high road or if he's considering, a return, if he's open to returning. It sounds like he's not. Like I said, he's a really proud guy. So it's going to take somebody at the very top, so Dana or Lorenzo, to call him and say, hey, we messed up, man. We want you to come back.
Yeah. I'm sure Bert, and the guy's seen it all. He was in, the corner. You can find pictures of him in the corner and entourage of Joe Frazier back in the day. So the guy's been around, and eventually it probably just comes to a point where you'd rather be at home, rather spend some time with your family. And I believe he lives in the Philly area, so he's maybe he wants to spend some time at the Republican or some other strip club out there.
Yeah,
not. I have invited him to the strip clubs in Philly, but he never took me up on my offer. So that's probably not true.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Bert, have a couple of drinks, but he's not closing the bar down. He was always, businessman. He would be there on that Monday or Tuesday before the fight, and it was up to him to make sure everything was going to go smoothly. And for like 14 years, it did. So I don't know what they're going to do now. I don't know if he had a protege that was, learning from him, or, more about backstage than I do.
Yeah, not that I remember. There's not one person who seemed like they were Bert's successor. So I don't know. Anybody who's put in for that job, I don't think they understand all the work that Bert did either. So I don't think it's going to be a highly sought after position.
Yeah, and the other thing, we're both wrestling fans too. I mean, Bert could cut a promo with the best of them. I mean, I was UFC 169. I one of the guys snuck me into the pre-fight meeting, and Bert was just cutting this epic promo. I mean, I'm talking like Paul Heyman level promo. And it's the same promo that he cuts every fucking time, but when he does it always, kind of makes the hair on your back or your arm kind of stand up. He just has this great delivery, and his enthusiasm is so infectious.
Yeah, it's just like, that the Baba O'Reilly video. UFC plays it all the time. I've seen it a million times. But as soon as that thing hits, I start getting goosebumps. And it's much the same thing with Bert. Now, I'll add in a little story here, Brian. And it's not that great of a story, but one time Bert comes backstage, and it was before my UFC debut. And a guy who may or may not be Chris from the Underground was backstage with me. And Bert comes in, asks if we need anything, and I can't remember how exactly the exchange went, but it ended with Chris asking Burt for a shoe shine. And
What?
yeah, being I guess Burt being coming from a different era, took that as like some sort of not like an offensive racial comment, but like, come on, man, what the hell? You can't ask a black man for a shoe shine. So yeah, that was my first like real encounter with Burt. So he cut a pretty good promo on Chris there after that. Man,
I mean, one of my experiences with him, we were at the Pearl at the Palms, theater, and it was one of the tough finales. And I don't know, maybe it was one that you were on. It was one when
same day.
It was
where this was, yeah.
Okay, so, I was doing shots with Stanky. Garrett's boxing. Are we talking about the same event?
Same one, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of feeling no pain, just kind of wandering around, and you know how the Pearl at the Palms is, like where they do the walkouts. They also allow the fans to walk out in that same tunnel. So like security at the Palms is just like, okay, they checked my ticket. Okay, sir, yeah, just go right down here, take your seat. And apparently they were going to do a walkout exactly when I'm walking in. And Burt just starts yelling at me like, baby, what are you doing, man? We're about to roll here. In his, very demonstrative way. I was like, I don't know. They told me to walk down here. He's like, all right, just pretend that you're supposed to be here, all right? And I guess that was what, like 07 or 08?
Yeah, 2008. Was that actually Burt on the line there, or was that an impression? I couldn't tell. It was so damn good.
No, it was pretty bad. No, but yeah, that's kind of a cool story. He's just like, all right, just pretend like you're supposed to be here.
Yeah. Hey, he's got it under control, I guarantee you. So
yeah, nothing happened, nothing crazy happened. But security, they weren't concerned about me. They're like, all right, this guy's okay. They were concerned about Stanky because apparently he had been kicked out of the arena several times, and he kept coming back.
Yeah, not surprising. I think that's what happened. I think that's how he kept his gig as the boxing coach on Team Nogueira. I'm pretty sure they tried to get rid of him. He just kept showing up.
What was so funny about that, too, was like he just kept name dropping Nogueira, and security would go over to Nogueira, and obviously Nogueira knew who he was, but he'd always give this like, I don't know who he is, man. He totally sold him out, and Stanky's like, hey, Nog, and I guess Nog knew that he was, had been drinking quite a bit, and he was just like, oh yeah, I don't know.
It's great.
That's all there is. Yeah. But
speaking of resignations, you want to move on here?
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about this Bill DeMott resignation.
Yeah. Wow.
There's nothing humorous about this one, guys.
It's no laughing matter.
No. It is, it's a general erection of bad news. God, that was such a fucking stretch. All right, but anyways, for those of you that don't know, Bill DeMott, the head trainer of WWE's NXT, their developmental, developmental territory or whatever you want to call it. I guess it's more of a territory now that they're going to be running house shows. But Bill DeMott resigned amidst allegations of racism and homophobic statements, and basically just being a general dick to all the wrestlers down there at NXT.
Well, I mean that doesn't, I don't. I mean, I'm a wrestling fan, but I don't think people realize like I don't follow it as closely as I kind of like joke about that I do. So I don't know a lot of the inside baseball, that I kind of know about MMA. But, I mean, you could just see Bill on camera, for 2 minutes and realize that, unless, I mean, the guy's kind of a jerk. Like, even if you like him, even if he's your friend, you'd be like, oh, yeah, Bill's he can be a freaking jerk sometimes.
Yeah. Well, it appears that a lot of people felt that way. I'll run through the rest of, or a couple of the things that he has been accused of in a second. But he has denied these allegations. He's stepped down, and Prince Albert, a.k.a. Lord Tensai, a.k.a. Matt Bloom, a.k.a. Giant Bernard, and I'm sure I'm missing some in there, has been named the new head trainer, or the interim head trainer for now at NXT. Bill DeMott was Hugh Morris in WCW, and that's pretty much all you need to know. So some of the things that, he's been accused of saying, and these are pretty good, that's why I'm saying them. He referred to the wrestler Joel Pettifer as Joel Pedophile.
I mean, well, come on. That's a logical conclusion to call. I mean, no? Yeah. Am I the only one?
I'm with you on this one. Yeah. If I got in trouble for all the stuff I said like that, I would never be hired by anyone ever again.
Well, just like, I was in high school. We had this guy. His last name was Germ. So what do you think his nickname was, Tom? I
don't know. I was going to say Wheat Germ, but I'm pretty sure that's...
We called him Sperm, and he fucking hated it.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's just like one of those, what's the most logical thing? But wasn't there something else that Dolph Ziggler's younger brother had a broken foot and he was walking in a one of those walking boots and DeMott kicked him or something?
Yeah, supposedly that told some trainees that he hoped they killed themselves. This one's pretty rough. He referred to the running power slam. Davey Boy Smith's running power slam, said it should be referred to as turning blue and dropping dead on the lawn. So yeah, that one's a bit rough. Especially, I don't know if it was at the time when Davey Boy Smith Jr. was there or what the deal was, but
I was listening to Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez talk about this a little bit, and they said that that comment really was too much for a lot of the guys because they knew Davey Boy's son, who's now in New Japan. Yeah.
Well, he also was reportedly slapped around Enzo Amore. So I'd actually like to extend a thank you to him for that, but just kidding.
I totally didn't get it, Tom. What does that mean?
No, it's one of the guys, Enzo Amore. He's just he's kind of annoying.
Is he in NXT?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's pretty good on the mic, but he's like a Jersey Shore douchebag type gimmick. Anyways, I do. So for those of you that don't know, I used to do some independent pro wrestling, and our former guest, Jerry Briscoe, had actually hooked it up and sent me to Deep South, where Bill was the trainer. And, I remember the training being really tough, not anything like that I would consider way out of the ordinary. And, I heard him make comments, but nothing that I would consider, to be cause him to be referred to as a bigot or anything, along those lines. I do remember, however, I can't remember if it was Zack Ryder or Kurt Hawkins because they were a tag team at the time. But one of them, they were doing these blow-up drills. That's one of the reasons why he got fired. These are just basically in-ring drills forced to fatigue you. And one of the two guys, I can't remember if it was Ryder or Hawkins, knocked himself out doing one of the drills. And, I remember Bill told him to sit down, didn't let him back in the drill. It kind of sounds like some of the accusations that these guys make, they wouldn't even be afforded that luxury. So he did, for those of you who follow wrestling closely and remember Festus, who's also known as Doc Gallows now, half IWGP tag champs. He was the fake Kane for a short time in WWE. And I think he beat Kane on a pay-per-view and then just kind of disappeared, which is bizarre. But he was training for that at the time. And I remember, I was there for just a week. And I took no less than 30 choke slams in a row from this guy. on a hard ass ring, at Bill's behest, I guess. So, there's tough training going on, but nothing insane.
So you got sent to Deep South Wrestling. Was it Jody Hamilton? Was a promoter?
Yeah, but he really didn't, on the day-to-day training and stuff like that, he wasn't even there. He was doing the promoting, but Bill was the one that was running the show backstage. And let me think of who else. I mean, John Laurinaitis was there for the TV taping that they did. Heath Slater was there, but he wasn't even under contract. He was just like a local indie guy. And I remember, some of the guys making comments about him in the back, because he was basically acting as a jobber for somebody on the TV show. And lo and behold, look at him now. He's kept his job on the main roster for 5 years.
Yeah, isn't he going through some legal issues now, or or did that get dropped?
Yeah, he got accused of sexual harassment or something, but it was the same exact time that he was proposing to his wife, and there was a bunch of people there. So I think they just have him on the sidelines, as a precaution. But yeah, it was something along those lines. I'm not too up to date on my Heath Slater sex gossip. So,
so how did you get sent to Deep South? You said Jerry Briscoe to answer my own question, but how does one? In that era, how would you get to that point that Jerry Briscoe would know to say, here's Tom Lawlor from Orlando, Florida, and I want to send him to developmental?
Brian, have you taken a close look at me? I'm the fucking man. What do you mean? How'd I end up there? Jerry called him and said, hey, he's going up there. I was doing indie pro wrestling, and basically the WWE used me as enhancement talent, or basically they just had me backstage and paid me $500 to eat catering in case they wanted to throw me into a security outfit and get beat up on Raw.
$500 for one day?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was $500 for from I had to be there at noon until whenever the Raw Super Show was done taping. So maybe it was less than that. Maybe it was $300. I don't know, something like that. It was definitely the most I ever made doing pro wrestling.
So how long were you at Deep South?
So they sent me up there for a week as a tryout, and then they called. I got a call saying I talked to Jerry again after that, a couple weeks after, and he said, just keep working on some stuff. We'll give you a call again. And they did, but by the time that they had, I was already done pro wrestling, and I had a real job, and I had started training to fight. So
sure. So just take us back a little bit, because I'm not sure that everybody. I kind of know your background because I talked to you quite a bit, and I was around the scene when you first, got some national publicity. But how did it all start? You went to the University of Central Florida, but they don't have a wrestling program, but you did wrestle.
Yeah. So basically, coming out of high school, I had a lot of Division II, Division III, some Division I offers for football and wrestling, and I decided I'm not going to take any of them. I don't feel like doing that. So I enrolled at the University of Central Florida, and after a few months, I just started. There was a wrestling club that had just started, so I started going in there and wrestling with the guys, and I'm fortunate enough that the student government at University of Central Florida pumped a bunch of money into sports clubs. And so by the second and third year that the club was going, we were traveling and wrestling Division I, teams. We would get invited to, invitational tournaments with, ranked Division II, Division III teams, NAIA teams. We'd wrestle open tournaments. And then there's also the NCAA, which is made up of club programs. Some schools, it's weird. They have varsity programs, but they're not in the NCAA. And also there's a lot of programs transitioning between divisions, either up or down from D1 to D2 to D3. and they have to sit out a few years when they make that transition. So those teams also wrestle in that league. So, by the time I was a junior or so, I was, wrestling a pretty full schedule against, a lot of tough guys. And, my senior year, I was 50-2, and I got taken down twice that year.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to ask this question. Is that a worked record like Goldberg's 188-0 or 50-2? Is that legit?
No, that was legit. Yeah, my senior year, I was 50-2. I got taken. Now, here's the even more fucking bizarre thing, right? One of those losses is to this guy, John Wieczorek, who fought in the UFC. And I think I was winning, like, it was, 7-2, 8-2, or 9-2, something like that, which in heavyweight wrestling, that's a beatdown. And I remember I look at the clock because there's like 4 seconds left. And as I do, I get fucking rolled and pinned.
Oh.
And I just walked off the mat, like, pissed off. But, whatever, worked out okay.
So
how much
were
match,
you weighing?
I was about 225, 230.
Yeah, so you're kind of a small heavyweight, right?
Yeah. The other time I lost that year was to a guy named Matt Faust. Do you know him? I think he might be the coach, one of the assistant coaches at Iowa or one of those schools now.
I don't know. What school is he from? Was he at Iowa?
He was at Virginia Tech then.
Oh, okay.
But he was a heavyweight from there. He was there when Brands was there.
Brent Metcalf.
I lost to him 3-1. And I think he ended up, I don't know if he was ranked 4th at that time or ended up 4th that year, but whatever. I mean, the deal is that I ended up wrestling, I won the NCAA title 3 times, which is the club league that I was talking about. And I also, I beat guys that were qualifying for the D1 tournament, D2, D3 All-Americans, NAIA All-Americans. So by my senior year, I was doing pretty well. And after that, I went into professional wrestling. I started doing some indie pro wrestling, training at a place in Orlando, Florida. And not too long after, I'm guessing within 3 or 4 months, I think I started having matches. I did that for about a year. And that's around the time that I, met Jerry, went to Deep South. And then after that, I came back and shortly thereafter started fighting MMA.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I remember it was probably the first time that we talked. It was shortly after you had a fight with Aaron Simpson, who has, really high-level wrestling credentials.
Yeah.
And you lost that fight, but I mean, I thought that the first round was a 10-8 round. I mean, maybe that's the reason why you liked me when I brought it up and why we're talking today. That I thought, it was an even fight. It should have been an even fight. There's a guy with these incredible world level wrestling credentials, and there, you didn't wrestle for a major powerhouse, but you guys were pretty equal. Like it's not like he could just take you down at will.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different sport. To its credit. And, myself, I've always had a tougher time dealing with the smaller guys. Anyways, I really like wrestling against bigger guys because it's easier to maneuver around them. But yeah, I mean, definitely it's a different sport. Look at John Jones, right? I mean, sure, he's a phenomenal wrestler, but nowhere near the level of some of the guys that he's fought. I mean, Daniel Cormier, he's nowhere near Daniel Cormier's level of international experience in wrestling. But, MMA is a different game, so...
Yeah, the thing with John though was he was a Division I recruit. He was going to go to Iowa State, but he didn't have the academics. I think if he would have went to Division I and shit, he might still be in the Olympic ladder right now. He might be if he didn't go to MMA.
He couldn't even beat Matt Riddle. Matt Riddle was the state champ when John Jones was in high school.
But was John a senior?
I don't know.
I just saw. Yeah, I know Ben Askren put that up there, but I think John was an underclassman, and then he was a New York State champion by his senior year, and he didn't have the academics to pass the clearinghouse.
Yeah, well, good for him. He doesn't need them anymore. So
yeah, he's making a lot more money than those guys who did get through the clearinghouse. But we kind of just took this long way. But I wanted to get back to UFC 184 and what I'm calling, or what a lot of people are calling, Ronda Mania. I mean, I don't know how much more people can talk about this girl, and it's quite amazing. I mean, she's just. I don't know what you can say about her, and I guess that's why they're talking about her fighting dudes, because she's so dominant. And as a draw, they did 2.7 million. Dave Meltzer is saying 500,000 to 600,000 pay-per-views. So what's your takeaway from Ronda UFC 184 in LA?
She's phenomenal. I'm not a huge fan of her and her characters, but I mean, you cannot deny anything that she's done. I mean, she's just absolutely destroying the competition. Kat comes out and basically throws her. Ronda just reverses it and armbars her. It seems like there's nothing that she can't do at this point. The only thing that I was going to say her movie career might set her back, but it doesn't seem like it's done any harm up to this point. I mean, after she did the movie, she's beating girls quicker than before.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with Ronda maybe is she was a high level athlete at age 14, so maybe now at age 28, she's 14 or 15 years into her lifespan as a high level athlete. And it's not like a sexist statement or anything, but female athletes peak sooner than male athletes, and then their decline is sooner. Just look at tennis. Like Serena Williams is considered old. She's an old timer because she's winning championships when she's 32 or 33 or whatever she is. So I don't know. I don't think anybody can beat Ronda, including Cyborg. Maybe they'll just have to wait for her to get old.
Yeah, could be the case. I mean, she could just be, such a freak. Or it could be that the women's divisions just haven't caught up yet, Sure, she's a lot higher skill level, it seems, than the rest of them. But eventually, things will create an even playing field. It just has to, That's the nature of the beast.
And that's an argument that I've brought up to people. It's just like, if you're a female and you're a great athlete, and what are you going to go into? You're probably going to go into soccer. You're probably going into softball, volleyball. They're great athletes. Not very really high level females are like, you know what? I want to go into a sport where I get punched in the face.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see a change in the future. Obviously, as the sport progresses, women are going to be more drawn to it. There's a number of fighters at pretty much all the gyms that are female nowadays. So, obviously it's going to continue to grow and get better. But you're right. One thing that people don't really take into account, I guess, in the public is what a high level Ronda's been performing in judo throughout her life since she was a teenager. And that's maybe not in the U.S., but as far as the world goes, that's a pretty serious sport. I mean, it may not be more competitive than judo across the board. I mean, even as far as wrestling goes, judo, I think has more participants worldwide. And these people who compete in the Olympics, and she's an Olympic medalist, if I'm correct, or a world medalist.
Bronze.
Yeah, I mean, these people are serious athletes, and for her to do that when it's she wasn't even in her athletic prime is a serious accomplishment. Seriously.
For sure. Yeah, and like you said, on a world scale, in this country, judo is not really a big deal. It's just something that people do on Saturday mornings at the YMCA. But on a world level, like you said, if you judge by participants, I think it's bigger than wrestling.
Yeah, I believe so. And, I have a little bit of firsthand experience. I was fortunate enough to train with this guy, Travis Stevens, who's been in the Olympics a few times and is also a high-level BJJ competitor. He's John Danaher and Renzo Gracie black belt. This guy, like, if he chose to go into MMA tomorrow, he'd probably end up being one of the top guys within a year or two. He's just the things he can do in the sport of judo that he can like transfer over to no-gi grappling with, obviously that's not his main goal. It's just phenomenal. I mean, this guy's off the charts, and I can only imagine that there's other, people in the U.S. who are high-level competitors like him who could do the same thing if they stepped into MMA. And I think it's just that Ronda is, the first one that did it. Sure.
One of the other things I wanted to talk a little bit about was Rampage Jackson. He's scheduled to fight in Montreal against Maldonado, and UFC just got hit with an injunction from Bellator about his contract. How much have you read about it, Tom, if at all?
Yeah, I've read quite a bit about it. So, what do you want to...
Yeah, I mean, just to give people a general overview, of course, the deal was signed with the previous regime. So that's Bjorn Rebney and Danaher. And basically the deal was consummated with a 2013 Tesla Sport worth $130,000 and an additional signing bonus of $100,000. So that's a pretty nice, welcome, for a guy that was on a steep decline. And then the fight purse was going to begin at $200,000. So I don't know how much you've looked at this, or like who do you think's in the right? Who do you think's in the wrong on this?
Boy, oh boy, that's a good question. My initial thought would be that just based on a lot of his past actions, Rampage is probably in the wrong here. But I guess it looks like there's some stuff that either Bellator, didn't provide, or I'm sorry, Viacom didn't provide. There's stuff in there about Rampage reality series, which I'm actually happy that we didn't have to watch it. A screenwriter for a feature film, through Viacom, stuff like that. Red carpet appearance at the MTV Video Music Awards. I don't know if Viacom came through on a lot of that stuff, and I think that's going to be the issue.
Yeah, what was also interesting, but Rampage would get 30% of any Bellator gate over $400K if he was on the card. And I believe it was $4 a pay-per-view for every unit above 190,000 buys. So, I mean, from what I've read here, I think that's the argument is Bellator did not give his manager, Michael Bisping's former manager, this guy Anthony McGann, he didn't give him a summary of the pay-per-views. They're alleging that Kevin K basically just called them up and said, hey, it did 100,000 pay-per-view buys and it didn't do enough for your pay-per-view cut to kick in.
Yeah, I had seen that Bellator, refuted that statement and just said that they had, alerted them to the pay-per-view buys. I don't know exactly what, that entails, whether they have to send it in writing and give proof, whether, it's on Rampage's management to do that. I don't know what the contract says. Quite frankly, I probably won't read it. So, I guess we have to take each side's word for it.
Sure. And the other thing about the contract was Bellator alleges that they spent $200,000 for the rights to a Rolling Stones song to promote Rampage, whenever that pay-per-view was. I guess it was in Memphis.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. Like
200.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Well, there's a lot of other stuff on there. Like, $50,000 bonus if he didn't get a certain amount from sponsors. So wait, what if he gets $49,000 in sponsors? Then he makes $100,000. I mean, how can you prove half that stuff?
Well, that's true, but I would assume it's one or the other. But like you said, yeah, it's very difficult to prove. Like, I didn't get a sponsor, or they only paid, $10,000 when meanwhile they paid $50,000. Just to make it up, as an example.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in there that are that are kind of crazy. The hearing's April 2nd. So.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these injunctions, even if they're like totally bullshit, they hold up in court. And I know one of our mutual friends here is going through a I don't know, it's not similar, but it's an injunction. Is Vinny Magalhaes, with World Series of Fighting and Titan. And, from what I understand, it's basically like, even when you're right, that injunction will be granted. Even if you're totally right, the injunction is automatic. And then this shit can get, drawn out. And when you're in a sport, and you have this very small window to, to capitalize on your athleticism, it works against you.
Yeah, but I mean, Rampage isn't at like the height of his career. So, I mean, I think you can kind of throw that part out the window, Obviously, he's past his prime. So, I don't think that's a huge factor in there. I think, I read somebody made a pretty good point. I can't remember where I saw it. But they said, this could help out the UFC as far as being, they could say they're not the only game in town if this holds up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good theory, too, because... Rampage, he has a lot of value to Bellator, right? Because they only have a couple guys who can draw big viewers. I mean, now they have Tito and they have Kimbo. Yep. But if UFC successfully ties Rampage up and keeps him out of the Bellator cage, then I think they just accomplished something right there.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you. I mean, obviously, I'm not the guy signing these contracts behind the scenes, but I'd be interested to know if it was just a case of like, hey, this could help us in the future as far as lawsuits go, and any look into that. So we might as well sign him. It doesn't matter if Bellator takes him back because this is helping us.
Sure. And, just to switch gears for a second, I wanted to get back to WWE with WrestleMania and the card. I'll just go through it real quick. It's really starting to take shape. Of course, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the world title. Looks like Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins with Jon Stewart involved in some capacity. And then the... Sting versus Triple H, John Cena versus Rusev, the ladder match for the Intercontinental title, and Tyson Kidd and Cesaro versus the Usos. Sounds pretty good in theory. It's, on paper, it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it looks all right. That ladder match for the IC title is pretty interesting. I'm sure it'll probably be like a show-stealing match, but it seems kind of like, it's just thrown together haphazardly. Bray Wyatt and The Undertaker, not really excited about that.
Yeah, how could I forget that one?
Well, easily, because it's probably going to be terrible. Sting and Triple H, I'm curious to see who wins. They've kind of positioned it like WCW versus WWE. So, and in the past, it seems like they're not too eager to put over WCW in that situation. So that leads me to believe, Triple H might be walking out the winner, which kind of goes against like conventional wisdom of what you would think would happen. But
yeah, so that brings us back, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, and another one of the big stories other than Burt Watson from UFC 184 was Brock Lesnar showing up in Los Angeles in this, custom-made suit, to watch the fights. And Dana said he's a fight fan, and he happened to be in Los Angeles that night, which I can totally buy because, Brock Lesnar, he'll hang out in LA all the time, right?
Yeah, I thought it was just because Tony Ferguson was fighting, former Team Lesnar member.
Yeah.
I thought maybe support him.
He's a badass, man. He's won, what, like 7 in a row?
Oh, he's looking great, right? I mean, he's nonstop. He's got good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling, good striking. He's tenacious as hell. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tony Ferguson and his fighting style.
Yeah, so I guess that did have probably a lot to do with Lesnar showing up, but I think the real reason was, 5 days earlier he had gotten in some kind of heated argument with Vince McMahon to the point where, allegedly, again, I wasn't there, they were afraid, the people backstage were afraid for Vince's security.
Brian, you weren't there? Are you sure? You share some similarities with McMahon's.
Right. Yeah. I've gotten that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the whole thing end up being a work, to be honest. It is drumming up more excitement for WrestleMania than there was before, I think. So I'm actually kind of hoping it is a swerve. That'd be good.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be shocked if Dana is like in on this work to try to drive the price up with Brock. I mean, if somebody had made you a ton of money in the past, wouldn't you kind of do them a favor and say, "Yeah, I'll play along with this if it's going to up your price"? I owe you one.
I don't know about that because I mean, UFC could use them too. We can see the shift kind of in UFC's business model, like. Look at Crow Cops fighting in a main event coming up soon, right? I mean, he's not a top 10 guy anymore, unfortunately. But they're going with these fights where there's, name fighters, and that's what's drawing in the fans. Ronda Rousey, right? I mean, that was basically a one-woman pay-per-view a couple weeks ago. So,
yeah,
they could use Brock Lesnar. I don't think UFC's in on it. What I could see is, I mean, Brock is a smart guy. Paul Heyman is Paul Heyman is a smart guy, but I'm sure some of it's rubbed off. Brock knows what he's doing. If he's in some battle with WWE and, he still knows he's not going to go back to UFC, I could see him showing up, just to put fuel to the fire.
But I question, why does he have to choose one or the other? It's like Dana had said, at UFC 146, I think it was, when it was all that all heavyweight card. He was like, people get it now. They know the difference. It's not going to jeopardize the legitimacy of the UFC if we have a guy who goes and does work matches when he's not fighting. People really? Know the difference.
Really? That's the stance? That's UFC's stance on it?
Well, that's what he said, 3 years ago? When they were trying to do Brock versus Fedor.
Yeah. I'm sure that's their stance for Brock.
But, yeah, and then the question begs, but I don't think that's Vince's stance because he doesn't want to see his world champion in a shoot fight get his ass kicked.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a WWE stance. I don't think that's a UFC stance either. Is I guess the point I was trying to make.
You don't think UFC would say, "Okay, yeah, go do a match at SummerSlam or Survivor Series, and come back when you're ready"?
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't even stand outside the fucking ring with Red Dragon, so.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing. That was the first thing that I thought of when I saw Shayna Baszler on the ROH pay-per-view, and I paid for that damn pay-per-view. I didn't stream it like the rest of you people, but I did order it in standard definition. But yeah, so Shayna Baszler is there, and I'm just like, wasn't that Tom's spot last summer? It was supposed to be like June 20th last year in Nashville. God. What happened with that?
I don't really know. TMZ wrote some bullshit article saying I was signing with Ring of Honor and I was going to go for the title, which, obviously wasn't happening. So I was, told that it would be in my best interest not to do it anymore.
But you did an appearance like on a house show? Was that right?
No, I did one up for an iPay-per-view, which ended up being the consensus Ring of Honor match of the year from last year. Check it out. It was Red Dragon versus the Young Bucks. featuring none other than myself, the corner man of champions, Filthy Tom Lawlor. So I did that, and it was cool. And then, after that, once they wanted to start using me more, it apparently wasn't cool anymore. And, as far as I'm concerned, it's a damn shame because I had such a blast doing it that, I would love to do that. I would love to do it every single match. I would follow those guys around. It's great.
Sure. And, I know that you're in a unique situation now as somebody who's under contract with the UFC. So I'm just going to say it. I think it's bullshit. I mean, they should let you do it. They let Josh Barnett go over to Japan and do his matches. They let Shayna Baszler, who's a bum, hasn't won she's won one fight. She's awful. She's an awful fighter. Let's be serious. And she's friends with Ronda Rousey. And that's the only reason why anybody is talking about her. And, they let her do this spot. They don't let you do this spot. I don't know. I can neither confirm nor deny that they let her do it because, she may not have cleared it for all I know. I don't know. Well, she's fighting March 23rd or 22nd in Brazil. So, I'm pretty sure she got it cleared.
Yeah. Hashtag FML.
Yeah, like I said, I think that sucks. I mean, you got a guy who has an opportunity to make a payday, and they're letting Barnett go out to Japan and do his matches and do his, Access TV thing with Mauro Ranallo. It's just like, come on. I don't like it. What's the downside? What's the downside of you on a Ring of Honor pay-per-view? If anything, they'll be like, oh, he's a big wrestling fan. I want to see him fight for real next time.
Yeah. I got more publicity for doing that than I did for anything in the UFC in any recent time, And honestly, there's a lot of Ring of Honor fans. The fucking commentators didn't know who I was, really. Kevin Kelly thought I was fighting John Jones in Zimbabwe or something. He didn't know what the hell was going on. But, I'm sure there's other fans out there of Ring of Honor that watch it, don't watch the UFC, and that would have watched me fight, would have gladly paid $10 to see me in the, the Fight Pass main event.
Yeah. And what was so interesting about Kevin Kelly had to say, she's friends with Ronda Rousey. Well, he didn't say she's friends with Ronda Rousey. She said, she's part of the Four Horsewomen. And it was like, oh, okay, so she's associated with Ronda. Okay, so now to get it over. And it was just like, they could have just said, that's Tom Lawlor, been with the UFC, has a winning record in the UFC for the past 7 years, and he's a badass, and just, it would have got over, instantly.
Well, he was trying his hardest. I think he self-admittedly doesn't watch the UFC, so I don't hold it against him. Because I'm telling you, everybody at that Ring of Honor show was super cool. Like, some of the coolest people I've ever met. It was great for me. And, I'm a big Ring of Honor fan, so an even bigger fan of them after being there.
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple of friends that were backstage there, and everybody, they're in the media, and everybody was just really friendly to them. And, Ring of Honor, if you want to see guys really work their asses off, a high work rate, watch it if it's in your local area, or, order the pay-per-views. The next one, I believe, is June 19th. Either, is it in New York? I think.
That I'm not sure.
Sure. I think it's the 19th, and it's in New York City. But
did I get a shout out on the pay-per-view?
You did actually. But I can't remember what context.
I don't know. Somebody tweeted something at me and said that Steve Corino said how much he loved me. So
no, actually, my memory's awful. That was actually me. He said.
Wait a minute. You tweeted it at me, and then I bring it up, and you forget.
Yeah, well, sometimes I forget these things.
Lay off the light, bro.
Yeah, and he said Tom Lawlor. I love that guy.
Yeah. Well, hey. Apparently, Ring of Honor does. I don't think Deep South did too much, obviously, and I don't know about the UFC. So
yeah, but
Ring of Honor, guys.
Sure. So let's finish this up. There are a couple of UFC events that are of pretty high interest, like UFC 185 in Dallas, and I guess the big fights to watch is Anthony Pettis versus Rafael Dos Anjos. And what's interesting about that fight is Clay Guida has beaten both of them, one via finish, and then the other one was a pretty clear wrestle fuck. I mean, Clay Guida's beaten both of these guys fighting for the world title.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think it's great. But I also think Anthony Pettis is going to, knock out Dos Anjos. Anthony Pettis is something special, if you ask me. Like, if you watch his past few performances, that guy's great.
Anthony Pettis is a badass, and he came out today. I kind of or the other day. I like what he was saying. He's like, I'm like BJ Penn. I'm going to be the king of pay-per-view. But if I was telling him, I was like, hey, Anthony, you got to be more consistent. With that message, you got to tell people I'm the best fighter in the world. You got to decide how to spend your money. You better buy the Anthony Pettis show. And he just seems, even during that last, what is it? Is it The Time Is Now or Welcome to the Show press conference? He was just so shy and just said all the right things. And it's just like, no, man, just go after it. Tear this guy apart. And because he has the same management as Chael. Chael can write his lines for him. But he's not going to be the king of pay-per-view if he's just Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah, agreed. And some guys just have it, and some guys don't. I'll tell you who won't be the king of pay-per-view, and that's Rafael Dos Anjos, whether he wins or loses. Because unfortunately, as far as drumming up interest goes here in the U.S., I just don't think it's there for him, as a challenger. Unfortunately, let's.
There's also Carla Esparza. I don't even know if I'm saying her name right. Versus, she's defending her belt versus somebody, Joanna.
Joanna. Is
that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so that's also on the card. And then, but the fight that I'm really interested in is Roy Nelson and Alistair Overeem. And then another fight that I think could go either way is Matt Brown versus Johnny Hendricks.
Yeah, that one to me is real interesting. I'll tell you what, Matt Brown is as real as they come. That guy is the man, and he is tough as nails. And Johnny Hendricks looks like he's got a new nutritionist. Dolce is out.
Yep.
I don't know if he contacted Gabbana and got him to be his nutritionist or what the deal is. Yeah, that was pretty lame. But it looks like he's in pretty good shape. So this could be a barn burner. Matt Brown's not going to stop coming after him. So, he's definitely going to push Hendricks' conditioning. As far as Nelson and Overeem goes, man, I don't know. It's, when you're in there against Roy Nelson and you've been knocked out a few times, it's dicey. But, Overeem would seem to be the more, technical stand-up wise. And, maybe we'll see this fight hit the ground. I mean, Overeem's no slouch on the ground. Everybody kind of just thinks he's a stand and banger. But, he's got really good guillotine and he's a big dude. He's finished a lot of fights on the ground.
Yeah, you're exactly right about Alistair on the ground. I mean, he's a really good grappler. In the stand-up, in the heavyweight division, anything can happen with one punch. And, he's been finished before. So, to me, it makes a lot of sense to look for the takedown, try to get Roy against the cage, tire him out, and hope it's the Roy Nelson that showed up against Frank Mir a few years back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, what's this? We got Chris Carriasso and Henry Cejudo at 125. I thought Cejudo was being forced into going up.
Well, I guess he finagled his way back to 125. He won the Olympic gold medal, 121, and then I forget what event it was, but for the second time in one calendar year, no, it wasn't. No, in one fiscal year or 12-month year. I just totally fucked that up, but. Yeah, when it happened, it had been 12 months. He didn't show up for the weigh-in.
Yeah.
I think that was Sacramento.
Who knows?
Do you remember that in the UFC 178 with Dillashaw? No, it wasn't 178. It was maybe 179 or something.
I think, wasn't he supposed to fight Joe Soto? No, what the hell?
Scott Jorgensen. Was it Scott Jorgensen?
Fuck, I don't know. Hey, but I'll tell you what, Ross Pearson is going to fight Sam Stout, so we can move away from Henry Cejudo since we botched that entire thing.
It's not the best analysis here.
No.
You better
as far as the undercard goes, other than the top 5 fights, I think that should be a good fight. Ross Pearson, Sam Stout. Sam Stout, hands of stone. Might have the lowest KO ratio for that nickname ever, but hey, his stand-up's pretty damn good. And Ross Pearson's got great boxing and has some power, so that should be a good one.
For sure. And then, I just wanted to finish off UFC 187. It's Memorial Day weekend in Las Vegas, and this is looking like one of the greatest cards in it. Forget UFC, maybe in MMA history. I mean, we're talking about John Jones versus Anthony Johnson, Chris Weidman versus Vitor Belfort, Cerrone versus Nurmagomedov, Arlovsky versus Travis Brown, Berkman versus Kim. That is an incredible card. I don't know if we're jinxing it now.
Yeah, we also got Islam Makhachev versus Leo Kuntz. Man.
Yeah, I didn't bring that up because I don't know how to pronounce either one of their names.
Yeah. Well, regardless, you were right. That show does look great. I didn't realize that the Nurmagomedov fight versus Cerrone was on there. So we'll get the Little Eagle versus the Cowboy. We'll see if he can wrangle him some poultry there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's Habib's first match back from tearing his knee out.
Yeah,
but man, I mean he just throws people around like they're a sack of potatoes.
Yeah, he absolutely ragdolled Rafael Dos Anjos. It wasn't even a fight, I mean, Dos Anjos was never in a position to get finished, but as soon as Nurmagomedov got a hold of him, it was like Dos Anjos was like a child, It's just amazing. I guess when you're wrestling a bear, as your main training partner up in the mountains, off the side of a cliff, you get pretty damn strong. And he's got to be the favorite. I think he's the best fighter in that weight class. I think Pettis might be able to beat him just because he's so dynamic. But, clearly Dos Anjos didn't have anything for him. And, I just think if he gets a hold of Cerrone, it could be a long 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, when Habib gets his hands on you, man, it's just like he'll do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what we got for you guys today.
But we're not even going to talk about the 2 championship fights? I guess we have plenty of time.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's not till Memorial Day.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, we got some time. I think we're a little bit over an hour. We want to keep it at 45 minutes?
Yeah.
So we're already over, so that's why. All right, so tonight I'm going to be keeping tabs on the Big Ten Championship Wrestling. I saw that Mick Mullen from Northwestern and Adam Kuhn from Michigan are in the semifinals, so one of those badasses aren't even going to get to their own conference finals. And there's also the Premier Boxing Champions card live on NBC with Al Michaels, Marv Albert, and Sugar Ray Leonard.
Yeah, there's a Ring of Honor iPay-per-view tonight as well.
Is it?
And
Yep.
And in other wrestling news, since we talked about it earlier, a fellow alumni from the University of Central Florida Wrestling Club, or Central Florida Wrestling Club, is wrestling in the EIWA finals tonight at 174, Santiago Martinez. So any claim I had to being the best wrestler coming out of University of Central Florida is probably no longer valid.
Oh, so Central Florida competes in that tournament with like Cornell and...
So, no, he finished his eligibility, his 4 years, and then transferred to Lehigh, or he's a grad student there. So he's doing his 5th year there, and this year is now in the finals.
Wow, good for him. I mean, Lehigh, that's an engineering school. That's not an easy school to get into.
Yeah.
Smart kid.
Yeah. So we got some legit guys coming out of Florida, coming out of Orlando.
Yeah, he can tell people that he's the next Tom Lawlor.
Yeah, I'd refrain from doing that unless he wants to get like fruit thrown at him or get stoned out in public. So,
well, do you know his record? Is he 50-2 also? Or
oh no, come on, nobody could be that good. No, I don't. I know he was ranked 3rd in the tournament, and then he was wrestling a kid from Navy, and the kid from Navy got injured and had to injury default out. But he's upset a lot of really tough guys in the past few weeks. So he might be coming home with the EIWA title tonight.
What a wuss! The kid from Navy, right? What a wuss! An injury. Come on.
And on that note.
I thought you were going to say, yeah, man, what a wuss. No. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Later.
Peace.
To that. So, I don't know if that's always the best attitude to take offense to somebody questioning you, but he does, at least from what I was told. And there was a couple different issues going on. Let's rewind it and give everybody the setting. It was Friday before UFC 184, and everything was going smoothly. With the pre-weigh-in, people show up, they try their gloves on, and everything was going smoothly. Something happened. It was a combination of Mark Munoz's weight cut and then an incident with somebody from Ronda Rousey's camp, and it got brought up the chain. From what I was told initially, Reed Harris was involved, and then it went above that, from what I'm told, and I can only assume that that's Dana White and Lorenzo, and they didn't take Bert's side. They flat out said, Bert, we're not with you on what you're saying. And he's a very proud guy. He got upset and he fucking quit. And it wasn't a heat of the moment thing, because it sure as hell sounds like he's done.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. You know a lot more on the subject than I do. I've been going to you to get my news. Pretty much, the only thing that I know is, from what I've dealt with Bert, and the guy's the man. I could definitely see him taking offense to something that somebody higher up would say if they're picking somebody else's side. And we could speculate all we want. The Mark Munoz thing, I put a little less stock into that because I just can't see, I guess I can't see the brass in the UFC taking, Munoz's camp side over Bert. It was said that it was Ronda Rousey's camp that Bert had an issue with. And if that's the case, you could definitely see the UFC brass picking the side of Ronda Rousey. She's the big cash cow for him right now. So, I would lean more towards, I'm guessing it was just an issue that just boiled up, and he got into it with, Reed Harris or somebody, and it just moved its way up the chain.
Yeah, it's such a weird story because, there's so many people running around backstage, but, so many there doesn't seem to be a ton of information out there. I mean, even Burt himself doesn't really want to go into specifics. So I don't know if that's just him taking the high road or if he's considering, a return, if he's open to returning. It sounds like he's not. Like I said, he's a really proud guy. So it's going to take somebody at the very top, so Dana or Lorenzo, to call him and say, hey, we messed up, man. We want you to come back.
Yeah. I'm sure Burt, and the guy's seen it all. He was in, the corner. If you can find pictures of him in the corner and entourage of Joe Frazier back in the day. So the guy's been around, and eventually it probably just comes to a point where you'd rather be at home, rather spend some time with your family. And I believe he lives in the Philly area, so he's maybe he wants to spend some time at the Republican or some other strip club out there.
Yeah,
not. I have invited him to the strip clubs in Philly, but he never took me up on my offer. So that's probably not true.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've seen Burt, have a couple of drinks, but he's not closing the bar down. He was always, businessman. He would be there on that Monday or Tuesday before the fight, and Tom, coming out of UFC 184, I think it was, the big story wasn't Ronda Rousey, beating somebody in 14 seconds. It was the legendary babysitter to the stars, Burt Watson, quitting the UFC after 14 years. And when I was told about it, I was shocked. And I started telling people, and they were like, no, come on. What was your reaction when you heard about it?
Yeah, Brian, I was actually on the plane coming back from Turkey when I found out about it, and I pretty much immediately messaged you right after to try to find out more news. I was shocked. Burt's been a mainstay, a staple. He's the guy, honestly, that makes everything run backstage. Like, as far as I'm concerned as a fighter, he's almost the first point of contact during that entire fight week. And he just does a phenomenal job. There's not too many people that have bad things to say about him, and there's a reason for that.
Sure. I mean, I reached out to some people to ask them about Burt, and I've been around the scene for a while, so I kind of had an idea what he did. But basically, everybody, it was almost unanimous. They said there's no one that can replace him.
Yeah, absolutely not. There's some really good people that work backstage for the UFC and do a lot of great things and, are phenomenal at their job. But there's not one person out there who could fill Burt's shoes. It's just not going to happen. It'll be interesting to see, what happens at these upcoming shows, because I can't imagine the UFC without Burt.
Yeah, and from the people that I reached out to, Burt is he's a very proud man, and he takes a lot of pride in the job that he does, and he keeps himself to a high standard. And so when somebody questions him, he takes great offense.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Remember this, when you're the greatest fighter in the world today, they got a name for you. They don't call you a great fighter, they call you Chael Sonnen and beat me, if you can.
And after tonight, none of you in this ring will ever be the same again.
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kid stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine right, jet flying, son of a gun, and I'm having a hard time holding these alligators down. Woo!
I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
And I have my cold beer. You have your cold beer? If not, you are fucking jabroni. Wash it down with 1 beer, 2 beers, 3 beers, a shot of whiskey.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
Coming up on this episode of the Filthy FRB Show, we'll be talking Burt Watson's resignation and what it means for the UFC. Ronda Mania coming out of UFC 184. We'll also be talking about the Rampage lawsuit filed by Bellator, UFC 185 coming up in Dallas, and UFC 187, one of the best cards in UFC history.
It was up to him to make sure everything was going to go smoothly, and for like 14 years, it did. So I don't know what they're going to do now. I don't know if he had a protege that was, learning from him, or you know more about backstage than I do.
Yeah, not that I remember. There's not one person who seemed like they were Burt's successor. So yeah, I don't know. Anybody who's put in for that job, I don't think they understand all the work that Burt did either. So I don't think it's going to be a highly sought after position.
Yeah, and the other thing, we're both wrestling fans too. I mean, Burt could cut a promo with the best of them. I mean, I was UFC 169. I one of the guys snuck me into the pre-fight meeting, and Burt was just cutting this epic promo. I mean, I'm talking like Paul Heyman level promo. And it's the same promo that he cuts every fucking time, but when he does it always, kind of makes the hair on your back or your arm kind of stand up. He just has this great delivery, and his enthusiasm is so infectious.
Yeah, it's just like, that the Baba O'Reilly video. The UFC plays it all the time. I've seen it a million times. But as soon as that thing hits, I start getting goosebumps. And it's much the same thing with Burt. Now, I'll add in a little story here, Brian. And it's not that great of a story, but one time Burt comes backstage, and it was before my UFC debut. And a guy who may or may not be Chris from the Underground was backstage with me. And Burt comes in, asks if we need anything.